So continuing with our example here, we have the costs that are indirect and the costs that are direct. So direct labor costs in this situation, we can see what they are as an example. So when we're producing red pens and black pens, the direct costs are materials and direct labor. So it's the first two lines here that we see. So we have direct material costs for blue, 75,000. Direct labor for blue is 30,000. So we can see that the direct costs more have to do with actual material and labor that applies to the specific product. We know exactly how much material and labor are required for these pens because we're the ones who are working with it. What we don't know is the overhead. And the overhead depends, the overhead, what does it include? It includes various items. It includes different processes. Usually is like rent or setting up machines or packing something has to do with the process. Now we're looking at more details now as we look at a change Cooper made from a simple manufacturing environment of just red and blue to also having red and purple. So we see what are the impacts. For example, direct labor costs have decreased and indirect costs have increased because now we have more automation, we have more processes. Now, as a specialty low volume product, red and purple pens were added, and now we're requiring more scheduling, more setups, more quality control, and a computerized system to track orders. So we're looking at stopping and starting to clean out colors. We're having more processes here, not necessarily more material. We're not talking, is more like replacing or automating or having more checkpoints in the process. And the production of these purple pens is more complex than just black and blue. Okay? Now the traditional costing system was just saying, hey, listen, you have a certain amount of labor hours in general, and each piece has a certain amount of labor hours. I'll allocate all that batch costing and setup costing according to the labor hours. But in a more complex environment like this one, we have a lot more stuff going on. Machine scheduling, design, scheduling material receipts, orders. We have to move materials. We have different information systems. It takes a lot more to produce this than just to say, hey, I had this many labor hours, so I'm going to charge that much overhead based on that. Doesn't give us quite the full picture. So with activity-based costing, what do? With activity-based costing, we start by looking at what activities are being used in the business and how do those activities consume the overhead. Remember, the goal here is to allocate the overhead properly to each group of product. How much is black pen using up? How much is red pen using up? How much is blue? How much is purple? How do we achieve that? Well, we want to figure out what are the activities that are using up overhead. Okay? And then we have to figure out how much is being used up of that activity in the overhead. So we have two types here. We have the activity, this is the process that uses up overhead. And we have the activity cost driver. This is what influences the increase of use of the process. So for example, if I have a process handle production runs, I can measure how much it's being used by knowing the number of production runs. Okay? If I have a process called setup machines, I can measure by knowing the amount of setup hours. Alright? Now, same for support products, same for run machines. Alright? Now, as we look at cost drivers and we look at activity costs, we can figure out now how much of each activity there is, how much the driver is, whether it's hours or setups, and the total cost. We know what the total cost is because we know the total cost of that process. And we'll continue in the next video with the exact example of breaking down this process.